Well, the British royals have posed for a new formal photograph. You notice there she's the only splash of color in this picture. But take a close look at her tiara.
What happened when Camilla took Catherine's tiaras by force shocked everyone in the royal household. But it was William's reaction that left Buckingham Palace reeling. It all started on October 28th, just days ahead of two major royal engagements looming on the calendar. On November 12th, Queen Consort Camilla was set to host a prestigious reception for Booker Prize finalists. Only 2 days later, on November 14th, King Charles III was scheduled to travel to South Wales to celebrate his official birthday. With these important events so close together, Buckingham Palace quickly became a hive of activity, with staff rushing from one task to another and every department under pressure to deliver absolute perfection. But what happened in the course of the preparations is something you don't want to miss. From the beginning, Queen Consort Camilla took a hands-on role. According to palace sources, she wanted everything to be flawless. She personally monitored several departments, including royal protocol, guest coordination, décor, lighting, and wardrobe. Insiders say she even approved the import of rare floral arrangements from overseas and ordered bespoke fabrics from Italy to elevate the palace interiors. To Camilla, these events were not just ceremonial, they were moments to project authority, refinement, and control. So by early November, everything appeared to be running smoothly. Guest lists were finalized, rehearsals were completed, and security measures were tightened. Staff believed the palace was fully prepared. But behind closed doors, an unexpected issue emerged, one that would quietly shake the royal household. The issue was the tiara. You see, in royal tradition, tiaras are not just decorative pieces. They represent rank, legacy, and power. Every tiara has a history, and wearing one sends a message about status and position within the monarchy. Choosing the right tiara is taken very seriously, especially for formal evening events that attract global attention. For Camilla, the problem became clear during her final wardrobe fittings. On November 12th, she planned to wear a deep blue gown for the Booker Prize reception. For King Charles's birthday celebration on November 14th, she had selected an elegant ivory outfit. However, none of the tiaras typically assigned to her worked well with either look. Some clashed with the colors, others appeared too heavy or outdated, and a few were unavailable due to maintenance or previous commitments. As the pressure mounted, Camilla grew increasingly frustrated. Determined to find a solution, she began looking beyond her usual options. That was when her attention reportedly turned to the Princess of Wales. Kate was known to have several tiaras that would perfectly complement both the blue and ivory outfits. One piece in particular stood out, and that was the Oriental Circlet Tiara, a refined and versatile jewel closely associated with Kate's role and image. On the evening of November 4th, after a long day of preparations, Camilla reportedly approached Kate in a quiet palace corridor to ask for her tiara. "I hear you have the Oriental Circlet available," Camilla said, her tone calm but firm. "It would be ideal for the upcoming events." Kate, surprised by the direct request, paused before responding. "I'm afraid I was planning to wear it myself," she replied carefully. "I have engagements coming up, and my outfits were chosen to match that tiara." Camilla's expression reportedly hardened. "You have plenty of jewelry," she snapped. "You don't need that one right now." Kate remained composed. With respect, it was assigned to me, and I had already planned my wardrobe around it. That was when the conversation shifted. "Why are you always trying to take attention?" Camilla reportedly said sharply. "Don't forget who I am. I am the Queen. When I need something for the good of the crown, I expect cooperation." Kate looked taken aback. "This isn't about attention," she replied quietly. "It's about preparation and respect." Camilla stepped closer, "You should know your place," she said coldly. "Everything here exists because of the crown, and I decide what is needed." There was a brief silence. Kate straightened herself, her face calm but pale. "I'll make arrangements," she said softly. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving behind a tension that lingered long after the corridor fell quiet. And that was only the beginning. By the following morning, whispers had already begun to spread through the palace corridors. Staff members exchanged quiet glances and lowered voices, aware that a confrontation had taken place, but unsure of the details. Nothing was officially confirmed, and many assumed the matter would be resolved privately, as was customary within royal walls. That illusion shattered just before midday. Camilla's personal security officer arrived at the royal jewelry vault alongside her senior designer and 2 palace officials. The visit had not been scheduled, which immediately caught the attention of the officer in charge of guarding the vault. He stepped forward, clearly cautious. "May I ask who sent you?" he said firmly. "These items are logged under the Princess of Wales." Camilla's designer replied, without hesitation. "We are here on the Queen Consort's instruction. The tiaras are needed for upcoming events." The guard frowned. "Is Catherine aware of this?" he asked. "Protocol requires her approval." There was a brief pause before the security officer answered coldly, "Catherine is not the Queen." The words hung heavily in the air. Just then, another aide stepped in and added, "Her Majesty has made it clear. The crown's needs come first." With visible discomfort, the guard signaled for the vault to be opened. Inside, rows of priceless jewels shimmered under soft lighting. The first item removed was the Oriental circlet tiara, the same piece at the center of the confrontation the night before. But the moment did not end there. 2 more tiaras were taken out, both closely tied to the Princess of Wales. One was the Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara, famously worn by Princess Diana, and now strongly associated with Kate. The other was the Lotus Flower tiara, a lighter, elegant piece Kate had worn on several formal occasions. All 3 tiaras were logged for temporary use under the Queen Consort's authority and sent for fitting and styling. By the time senior aides learned what had happened, it was clear this was no simple borrowing. To many inside the palace, it felt deliberate, less a request and more a statement of power. The news reached Catherine at exactly 4:30 p.m. She was in her private sitting room when Mr. John Harrington, the long-serving head of the Royal Jewelry Vault, was quietly shown in. His face was tense, his posture unusually stiff. Catherine immediately sensed something was wrong. "I'm very sorry to disturb you, Your Royal Highness," he said carefully, "but I felt you needed to know." He explained everything: the unscheduled visit, the instructions given in Camilla's name, and the removal of not 1, but 3 tiaras. As he spoke, Catherine's face tightened, her hands clenched in her lap. "She took them?" Catherine asked, her voice low. "Without my consent?" "Yes," Mr. Harrington replied. "I raised concerns. I asked whether you had approved it." Catherine exhaled sharply. For a brief moment, anger flashed across her face. But years of royal training quickly took over. She straightened her posture and nodded calmly. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "You did the right thing." After Mr. Harrington left, Catherine sat alone in silence. The anger was still there, but beneath it was something deeper: disbelief. An hour later, she rose with purpose. Catherine made her way to Camilla's private office. The Queen Consort was there, surrounded by her staff, her dresser, her designer, and 2 senior aides. The room fell quiet the moment Catherine entered. "May I speak with you?" Catherine asked, her tone firm but controlled. Camilla looked up, clearly irritated. "Say it here," she replied. I have nothing to hide. Catherine took a step forward. Why were my tiaras taken without my permission? She asked. I told you I was going to make arrangements for the one you requested. Yet you went ahead and took 2 more. Camilla's lips tightened. I took what was needed, she said coolly, because you were behaving as though you were already queen. A murmur passed through the room. Catherine stiffened but held her ground. Those tiaras are assigned to me, she said. There is protocol. There is respect. Camilla let out a short, sharp laugh. Respect? She snapped. You seem to forget who wears the crown now. I am the queen. I don't ask. I decide. This isn't about power, Catherine replied. It's about boundaries. Camilla leaned back in her chair. You're mistaken. It's always about power. The staff stood frozen, watching the exchange unfold. Catherine was being openly challenged, humiliated, in front of them. Still, she did not raise her voice. You took 3 tiaras, Catherine said, slowly. Not 1. That was unnecessary. Camilla's eyes narrowed. I took them because I could. Silence filled the room. Catherine inhaled deeply. Then understand this, she said quietly. This will not be forgotten. She turned and walked out, her expression calm, but her hands trembling at her sides. Later that evening, as Catherine tried to compose herself, a discreet knock sounded at her door. It was Lady Eleanor Whitmore, a senior palace aide known for her loyalty to protocol. Eleanor had worked closely with Catherine for years and had access to inner palace communications. I wouldn't come unless it was important, Eleanor said softly. Catherine nodded. What is it? Eleanor hesitated. I was contacted by someone from the wardrobe team. They overheard a fitting discussion. Catherine's stomach tightened. Go on. The lotus flower tiara, Eleanor said carefully. It's not for Her Majesty's use? Catherine's eyes widened. Then why was it taken? Eleanor lowered her voice. It's being prepared for Camilla's granddaughter, Lola Parker Bowles. The words landed like a blow. A non-royal? Catherine whispered. Yes, Eleanor replied. It's meant for a private appearance. No official event. No royal duty. Catherine felt the room spin slightly. That was not just improper. It was a clear violation of royal rules. Royal tiaras were never loaned for personal family use, especially not to non-working royals. This wasn't about necessity, Catherine said quietly. It was a message. Eleanor nodded. I thought you deserved to know. Catherine placed a hand over Eleanor's. Thank you, she said sincerely. When Eleanor left, Catherine remained seated, staring at the floor. The anger had drained away, replaced by sadness. That evening at dinner, the atmosphere felt heavy. William was away on a palace assignment, leaving Catherine alone with the children. George noticed first. Mummy, are you all right? He asked gently. Charlotte studied her face. You look sad. Catherine forced a smile. I'm fine, darling. Just a long day and I'm missing Daddy, that's all. But the children could sense the truth. As she tucked them in later that night, Catherine finally allowed herself a moment alone. The palace felt colder, quieter. She had held her dignity. But the insult had cut deep. And this time, it was personal. But what happened next shocked everyone in the palace. By the following morning, rumors were everywhere. Servants whispered in corridors. Aides checked schedules more than usual. Security officers stood straighter than before. Word had spread that Prince William and Princess Anne might be returning earlier than planned. For Catherine, the news was unexpected and deeply comforting. William had been due back on the 6th. Hearing that he might return sooner filled her chest with warmth. She did not care about protocol or timing. She just wanted him home. If there was anyone who could steady her now, it was William. That morning, her mood lifted. It showed in the way she greeted staff, in the softness of her smile, in the calm way she carried herself through the day. Several aides noticed it immediately. "She looks lighter today," one whispered. But the joy did not last. Just before noon, Catherine decided to call William herself. She needed to hear it from him. When he answered, his voice was warm and familiar. "Hello, love." Her heart tightened. "I heard you might be coming back earlier," she said carefully. "Is it true?" There was a pause on the line, brief but heavy. "I'm sorry," William said gently. "There's been a mix-up. Anne and I will return on the 6th as planned." Catherine closed her eyes. "Oh," she said quietly. "I know it's disappointing," William continued, "but I promise I'll be home very soon." "Yes," she replied softly. "Of course, I understand." After the call ended, Catherine sat still for a long moment. The brief happiness drained away, replaced by the familiar ache in her chest. The tiara issue, the confrontation, the words spoken behind closed doors, it all returned at once. William was not just her husband. He was her safe place, her closest friend, the one person she trusted with her deepest pain. She wanted to pour everything out to him, but she would have to wait. The night passed slowly. Then, on the morning of November 7th, everything changed. Prince William and Princess Anne returned after their formal briefing with the king. The palace seemed to breathe again. The children ran toward William the moment they saw him. George clung to his leg. Charlotte laughed. Louis jumped into his arms. For a brief moment, Catherine allowed herself to smile. It was small and fleeting, but real. Seeing William back in the palace, hearing his laughter echo down the hallway, watching him kneel to speak softly with the children, it reminded her of what steadiness felt like. For days, she had been holding herself together with discipline alone. Now, for the first time, her heart felt lighter. But the smile did not last. Later that evening, after dinner had ended and the children were tucked safely into bed, the palace slowly grew quiet. The noise of staff faded, footsteps softened, and the long corridors returned to their familiar stillness. William and Catherine finally retreated to their private quarters, a space that belonged only to them. William closed the door behind them and turned to face her. He did not need words at first. One look was enough. Her shoulders were tense. Her eyes looked tired in a way sleep could not fix. The calm mask she wore so well had begun to crack. "You don't look all right," he said gently. "What's wrong?" Catherine opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Her throat tightened. She shook her head slightly, as if trying to dismiss the question. William stepped closer, his voice softer now. "No," he said. "Something's happened." She exhaled slowly and moved toward the sofa, sitting down with care. She folded her hands tightly in her lap, fingers pressing into one another. For a long moment, she stared at the floor, gathering herself. Then finally, she spoke. "While you were away," she said quietly, "something went very wrong." William sat beside her at once. "Tell me." And she did. At first, her words came slowly. She spoke of Camilla's demand, how sudden it was, how little room there had been to respond. She described the corridor, the tone of the conversation, the way certain words made her feel small, unseen, and dismissed. Then she told him about the vault. She explained how the tiaras had been taken without her consent. Not one, but 3. She spoke about the confrontation, about standing there in front of staff while her authority was questioned, her position reduced, her dignity challenged. And then she reached the final blow. "The lotus flower tiara," she said, her voice breaking. "It wasn't even taken for royal duty. It was for personal use, for someone outside the royal role." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. She had held them in for too long. William did not interrupt her. He did not look away. He did not move. He listened with complete focus, every muscle in his body tense with restraint. When she finished, the silence between them felt heavy, almost painful. "That is unacceptable," William said at last. His voice was low, controlled, but filled with quiet anger. "You should never have been treated like that." Catherine shook her head slowly. "It wasn't just about authority," she said. "It was about erasing me." William looked at her carefully. "Explain." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "You know those tiaras," she said softly. "But I don't think I've ever told you what they truly mean to me." William nodded once. "I'm listening." She began with the first. "The Oriental circlet," she said, her voice calm but emotional. "It was one of the first tiaras I was trusted with after I became Princess of Wales. It's not loud. It doesn't demand attention, but it carries strength." She looked down at her hands as she spoke. "It was worn by Queen Alexandra during times when restraint mattered more than display. When I wear it, I feel balanced, grounded. It reminds me that leadership doesn't need to shout to be powerful." William watched her closely, his expression softening. "The lover's knot," she continued, her voice tightening slightly. "That one carries a different kind of weight." She paused, swallowing hard. "It was Diana's," Catherine said quietly. "She wore it often. When people see it on me, they don't just see a tiara. They see her." Her voice trembled now. "I never wear it lightly," she went on. "I wear it when I feel strong enough to carry her memory, when I want to honor the role she never got the chance to finish." William's jaw tightened, emotion flashing briefly across his face, but he said nothing. "And then," Catherine whispered, "there's the lotus flower tiara." She paused longer this time, choosing her words carefully. "That one represents change," she said. "It symbolizes renewal, growth, grace under pressure. I wore it when I was still finding my place, when everything felt overwhelming, and I needed reminding that becoming something new is painful, but necessary." She looked up at William, tears shining in her eyes. "That tiara helped me remember who I am," she said. "And it was taken, not for duty, not for the crown, but to make a point." William reached out and took her hands in his, holding them firmly. "They weren't just jewels," Catherine whispered. "They were pieces of my journey." For a moment, William said nothing. Then his voice came, steady and resolute. "This will not end like this." Catherine searched his face. "I don't want conflict," she said quietly. "I just want dignity." "You deserve dignity," William replied without hesitation, "and respect. And you will have both." The strength in his voice finally allowed her to let go. She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, protective, steady, present. "I should have been here," he said softly. "You're here now," she whispered. For the first time in days, Catherine felt safe, but as he held her, William's eyes remained open, distant, and focused. Because he already knew one thing for certain: this was not over, not even close. By the following morning, William was already awake. The clock beside the bed read 6:54 a.m. He had not slept deeply, and when his eyes opened, his mind was clear and decided. There would be no waiting, no careful delays. What had happened could not be ignored any longer. 6 minutes later, Catherine stirred beside him. She turned slightly, her eyes half open, still caught in sleep. Before she could speak, William's voice broke the quiet. "We're going to act immediately," he said. "Today, to be precise." There was no greeting, no softness. Catherine sat up slowly, pushing her hair back. "Act?" she asked, blinking. "William, it's barely morning." He turned to face her. "I know." She stretched her arms lightly, trying to clear her head. "Going to act where?" She paused, then added, confused, "And how?" William did not raise his voice. He did not rush his words. "We're going to address this," he said. "Properly." Her brows drew together. "Address it with who?" He held her gaze. "My father." That woke her fully. Catherine was silent for a moment. She looked down at the bed covers, then back at him. "Today?" "Yes." She inhaled slowly. There were a dozen questions she could have asked, a dozen worries she could have voiced, but she didn't. She had spent days choosing restraint. She would not undo that now. "All right," she said quietly. William reached for her hand. "I won't let this be brushed aside," he said. "Not after what you were put through." She squeezed his fingers once. "I know." They got out of bed together. Catherine moved toward the window, pulling the curtains back just enough to let the light in. The palace grounds looked calm, almost indifferent. It struck her how easily pain could hide behind beautiful walls. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that felt like armor, simple, structured, dignified. William did the same. Neither spoke much, but their movements were synchronized, purposeful. As she fastened her bracelet, Catherine finally said, "I don't want this to become a battle." William stepped behind her. "It won't," he replied, "but it will be clear." Breakfast was quiet. She barely touched her plate. Her thoughts drifted, not to anger, but to disappointment how something so deeply personal had been handled with such disregard. At 9 a.m., they were ready. As they walked side by side, Catherine felt a mix of nerves and calm. Whatever happened next, she would not face it alone. William opened the door for her and said softly, "We'll do this together." She nodded. Catherine straightened her shoulders, reminding herself of something important. It was so precise that she muttered it out loud. Dignity did not mean silence. And today, she would no longer be silent. When William and Catherine arrived at King Charles's chambers, the atmosphere was unusually quiet. The long hallway outside the king's private offices was almost empty. A few staff members moved quietly in the distance, their footsteps soft against the polished floors. William walked with calm purpose, Catherine beside him, her posture straight, but her hands tightly folded. At the secretary's desk, the woman looked up and froze slightly. "Oh," she said, clearly surprised. "Your Royal Highness, I wasn't expecting you." William gave a polite nod. "We need to see the king." The secretary hesitated. "You're not on today's schedule." "I know," William replied evenly. "But we'll wait." The secretary glanced at Catherine, then back at William. She stood up. "His Majesty hasn't arrived yet. He should be here shortly." "That's fine," William said. They were shown to a small sitting area just outside the king's study. Catherine sat down carefully, smoothing her skirt. William remained standing for a moment, then joined her. The room was quiet. In fact, it was too quiet. Minutes passed slowly. Catherine kept her eyes forward, but her thoughts were loud. She could feel her heartbeat in her chest. This was not something she had planned. She had never wanted this kind of moment, but it had been forced upon her. William glanced at the clock. 15 minutes had barely passed when footsteps echoed down the corridor. King Charles appeared, walking briskly, a folder tucked under his arm. He stopped the moment he saw them. "William?" he said, surprised. His eyes moved to Catherine. "Catherine?" William stood. "Good morning, Father." Charles looked genuinely caught off guard. "I wasn't aware you were coming." "I know," William replied. We needed to speak with you." Charles studied their faces. Something in their expressions told him this was not casual. "All right," he said after a pause. "Come in." He led them into his study. The door closed behind them, shutting out the rest of the palace. Charles set his folder aside and gestured for them to sit. "What's going on?" William waited until Catherine was seated before speaking. "This concerns a serious breach of protocol," William said calmly. Charles frowned slightly. "Go on." Catherine inhaled slowly. Her voice was steady, though it took effort. "Yesterday," she began, 3 tiaras under my care were removed from the vault without my knowledge or permission." Charles turned sharply toward her. "Without your permission?" "Yes, sir," she said, "including the Oriental circlet, the Cambridge lover's knot, and the lotus flower tiara." Charles's expression tightened. "Who authorized this?" William answered. "Camilla." There was a brief silence. Charles leaned back in his chair. "I assume there's more." Catherine nodded. "There was a conversation the night before," she said. "I was asked to lend 1 tiara. I explained I needed time to resolve it properly. Instead, the following morning, all 3 were taken." "And in front of staff?" William added. "Without consultation?" Charles looked troubled now. "That should not have happened." "There's more," Catherine said quietly. Charles looked at her again. "Go on." "The lotus flower tiara," she said, choosing her words carefully, "was not taken for royal duty." Charles's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I was informed," she said, "that it was intended for personal use by a non-royal family member." The words settled heavily in the room. Charles exhaled slowly. "That is highly inappropriate." William's voice remained controlled but firm. "This wasn't only about jewels. It was about authority being used to humiliate." Catherine lowered her gaze briefly, then looked back up. "I have always respected the hierarchy," she said. "I have never overstepped, but this crossed a line." Charles rubbed his temple, clearly processing. "I don't want conflict," Catherine continued. "I only want proper boundaries and respect for the role I hold." William added, "And clarity. This cannot happen again." Charles was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he straightened in his chair. "I understand your concerns," he said, "and I agree. This matter should have been handled differently." He looked at Catherine. "You should not have been put in that position." She inclined her head slightly. "Thank you, sir." Charles stood. "I will look into this," he said firmly. "Personally." William nodded. "That's all we're asking." Charles met his son's eyes. "I'll address it." And with that, the conversation came to a pause, heavy, unresolved, but no longer ignored. But it did not end there. As William and Catherine turned toward the door, ready to leave, King Charles paused. "Wait," he said suddenly. They stopped. Charles stood still for a moment, as if weighing something carefully in his mind. Then he looked up. "Come back," he said quietly. William and Catherine returned to their seats. Catherine felt her chest tighten. Whatever this was, it wasn't finished. Charles reached for the phone on his desk and pressed a single button. "Yes?" he said to the voice on the other end. "Please ask the Queen Consort to come to my study immediately." He released the button and leaned back in his chair. The room felt heavier now, the air thick with expectation. Neither William nor Catherine spoke. A few minutes later, the door opened. Camilla entered the room, composed and confident. She smiled briefly, then stopped when she saw William and Catherine still there. The smile faded, replaced by a guarded expression. "Charles," she said, "you wanted to see me?" "Yes," the king replied evenly. "Please sit." Camilla did so, crossing her hands neatly in her lap. "What is this about?" Charles looked directly at her. "I've just been informed about the removal of several tiaras from the vault," he said, "including pieces under Catherine's care." Camilla's expression hardened slightly. "I was setting respect for the crown," she replied. "Those jewels belong to the institution, not to any one person." William shifted in his seat but remained silent. Camilla continued. "There were important events. Decisions had to be made. I acted as queen consort." Catherine sat very still, her face calm, though her hands were clenched together. Charles raised his hand slightly. "Acting for the crown does not mean bypassing protocol," he said. Camilla tilted her head. "The protocol must sometimes bend," she replied, "especially when others forget their place." The words landed sharply in the room. Charles straightened in his chair, his voice firm now. "That is not how this family, or this crown, functions." Camilla opened her mouth to respond, and Charles spoke again, his tone unmistakably final. "This matter is a dent to the image of the royal family," he said firmly. "It is an insult to Catherine, and it should never have happened." Camilla stiffened slightly. "With immediate effect," Charles continued, "all 3 tiaras will be returned to the vault. There will be no exceptions." He paused, then added words that no one in the room expected. "You will not wear a tiara at the Booker Prize reception," he said, "and you will not wear one during my birthday events either." The silence that followed was heavy. Camilla looked momentarily taken aback. For the first time since entering the room, her confidence faltered. She opened her mouth as if to argue, then stopped. Slowly, she nodded. "Very well," she said quietly, "if that is your decision." "It is," Charles replied. He turned to Catherine. His expression softened. "I'm sorry you were placed in this position," he said. "It should not have reached this point." Catherine inclined her head. "Thank you, sir," she said calmly. William stood as well. "We appreciate you addressing it," he added. Charles nodded once. "This ends here." Within hours, palace staff confirmed that all 3 tiaras, the Oriental Circlet, the Cambridge Lover's Knot, and the Lotus Flower Tiara, had been returned to the vault by midday. The matter was handled quietly, with no official statement issued. When the Booker Prize reception took place days later, many noticed something unusual. Camilla appeared without a tiara. Instead, she wore an elegant sapphire necklace and matching earrings. To the public, it looked like a deliberate style choice. But questions quickly followed. Royal commentators speculated. Some suggested a modern approach. Others hinted at personal preference or last-minute changes. None mentioned the real reason. The same thing happened during the king's birthday events. Once again, no tiara. The silence around the decision only deepened the mystery. Inside palace walls, however, the truth was known. Weeks later, during a formal state banquet, Catherine stepped into the room wearing the Oriental Circlet tiara. It rested lightly on her head, simple yet commanding. Many remarked on how beautiful it looked on her, how natural it seemed. Photographs spread quickly, praised for their elegance and grace. But Catherine did not wear it for beauty. She wore it as a reminder of boundaries, of dignity, of the quiet strength it takes to stand firm without raising one's voice. And as she moved through the room that evening, calm, composed, unshaken, those who understood the weight of that moment knew one thing for certain. Some crowns are not claimed, they are earned. So what do you think about how Prince William handled this situation and stood up for Catherine? Do you believe the decision sent a strong message within the royal family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more royal updates. and be sure to check out the next video on your screen. You won't want to miss it.